Emily sat at the kitchen table, carefully slicing strawberries into her daughter's cereal. It was the kind of quiet morning she had once dreamed of, a soft sun filtering through the blinds, her little girl humming tunelessly as she played with her spoon, the scent of coffee lingering in the air. Her husband, Mark, was already out the door, the sound of his car engine fading down the street 15 minutes earlier, like clockwork. He was nothing if not reliable, always out early, always back by 6:30, always smiling as if nothing in the world could bother him. But lately, Emily had started to feel the cracks beneath the surface of their routine. It wasn't that Mark had changed, he hadn't. It was her. Something inside her had started shifting, a low ache for something she couldn't quite name. Some days, it was just a passing thought. On others, it lingered like a fog. She dropped Lily off at preschool at 9, then drove to the community college where she'd recently enrolled in a part-time literature course. It was a decision she had made during a restless night when Mark was asleep beside her, their daughter's soft breathing drifting in from the baby monitor. She missed feeling like her own person. The course was a compromise, something small, manageable, just 2 days a week. Her professor, Daniel Whitmore, was a man in his early 40s, with a quiet, intelligent way about him. He wore worn blazers and always carried a leather-bound notebook. He had a habit of quoting poetry not to impress, but as if the words were always living just behind his thoughts. He spoke to the class with ease, never overbearing, always thoughtful. At first, Emily didn't think much of him beyond the classroom. But she noticed things. How he remembered students' names without glancing at a roster. How he asked follow-up questions on assignments. How he listened, really listened. One afternoon, after class ended and students filed out chatting and laughing, Emily stayed behind to ask a question about the next paper. Daniel looked up from his desk, his expression open and calm. "I was wondering if I could write about a more personal experience," she asked. "Something not directly tied to the text, but maybe inspired by it?" "Absolutely," he said, setting down his pen. "Literature is often just a mirror for what we're already carrying around. If you can find a way to connect your own story to the themes, that's exactly the kind of reflection I'm hoping for." Something about the way he said, "your own story," made her pause. She nodded and thanked him, but the words stuck with her long after she left the room. The weeks passed quietly. Mark never questioned her class schedule. He seemed almost relieved that she had something for herself. Most evenings, they ate dinner as a family, watched a show, and tucked Lily into bed with stories and lullabies. It was peaceful, stable, but in Emily's chest, the ache deepened. She began staying a little longer after class, helping Daniel organize papers or discussing readings. It felt harmless. She told herself it was just curiosity, an appreciation of intellect. Nothing wrong with enjoying a good conversation. But she started dressing with more care on class days, subtle changes, a touch of mascara, a necklace she hadn't worn in years. One rainy afternoon, Emily arrived early, the halls still mostly empty. She stepped into the classroom just as Daniel was placing a fresh cup of coffee on his desk. "Early bird," he smiled. "I didn't want to sit in my car," she said, brushing water from her sleeves. "It's miserable out there." He gestured to the seat near his. Then, "You're welcome to wait in here. I've got an extra cup if you want one." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks." They talked as the rain tapped against the windows, a soft rhythm that made the room feel cocooned. Their conversation moved easily, from the course material to books they'd loved as teenagers, to music, to how quickly time moved now that they were older. Emily found herself laughing more than she had in months. After that day, the dynamic between them subtly shifted. There were longer glances, shared silences that felt charged but unspoken. She never told Mark about the coffee or the conversations, not because anything had happened, but because she wasn't sure how to explain it, because it mattered more than she was ready to admit. Then came the day Daniel asked if she'd consider being part of a small group of students attending an off campus lecture. A visiting writer, someone he admired, was speaking at the local university. "It's informal," he said, "but I think you'd enjoy it. You always engage with the text so personally. I think it'll resonate with you." Emily said she'd think about it. That night at dinner, she told Mark about the lecture, framing it as just a school event. "Go for it," he said between bites of pasta. "You deserve a night out. I'll handle bedtime with Lily." The evening arrived. She wore a soft blue dress and a jacket she hadn't worn in years. Her heart fluttered, but she told herself it was just nerves. The lecture hall was warm, the audience murmuring quietly as they took their seats. Daniel was waiting at the entrance, smiling when he saw her. "I'm glad you came," he said. The talk was engaging, but Emily found herself distracted. She was too aware of Daniel beside her, of how his elbow brushed hers when they shifted in their seats. Afterward, he suggested grabbing a coffee at the campus cafe, and she agreed before she could think too long. They sat across from each other in a booth near the window, steam rising from their cups. The conversation wandered, dipping into more personal territory. His divorce, her life as a mother, the dreams they once had that felt shelved. There was no flirtation in their words, but the air between them was different now. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, she saw herself as someone else. Not just a wife or a mother, but a woman with her own story, just like he had said. She left the cafe with a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration swirling in her chest. When she got home, the house was quiet. Lily was asleep, and Mark was reading in bed. "How was it?" he asked, closing his book. "It was good," she said. "Interesting speaker." "I'm glad you went." He leaned over to kiss her cheek, and she smiled faintly, but her thoughts were already miles away. Over the next few weeks, she found herself checking her phone more often. Daniel had started emailing her articles and poems, casual exchanges that turned into longer messages. She replied late at night, sometimes while Mark slept beside her. It was still innocent, mostly. But there was a turning point. One afternoon after class, Daniel asked if she had a few minutes. He seemed hesitant, almost nervous. "I was thinking," he began, "that maybe you'd like to grab coffee sometime. Not as a student, just as Emily." She stared at him, unsure what to say. The room felt still, heavy with everything unsaid. "I know this could be complicated," he continued. If it's not something you want, I'll respect that, truly." Emily didn't answer right away. She just nodded slowly, her heart beating louder than the rain against the window. Later that night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Lily's soft breathing through the monitor and Mark's steady breath beside her. She felt caught between two versions of herself, one that had everything she was supposed to want and one that was quietly reaching for something else. Emily sat in her parked car just outside the college library, hands resting on the steering wheel, unmoving. It was supposed to be just another class day, routine, predictable, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Not since that conversation with Daniel. Not since he had spoken her name like it carried weight, like it meant something beyond schedules and errands and storybooks read aloud at bedtime. She hadn't answered him that day, at least not clearly. Just a nod, just silence. But in the following days, her thoughts returned again and again to the possibility he'd offered. Coffee, not as a student, but as herself. It had been a long time since someone had looked at her that way. Not as Lily's mom, not as Mark's wife, not as a helper or caretaker or scheduler of endless to dos, but as a woman. She had never intended for things to change between them. And yet, they had. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, until the air around their conversations felt different, charged, curious. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Daniel. No pressure, but I'll be at the cafe down the street after class. In case you would like to talk. She read it twice, then a third time. There was nothing inappropriate in the message, no assumption, no hidden meaning. Just an open door. Emily didn't respond. Instead, she stared out at the gray clouds moving slowly across the sky. Then she reached for the handle and stepped out into the cool afternoon. The cafe was quiet when she arrived. Daniel sat by the window with a book in his hand, half read, his coffee untouched. He looked up as the bell above the door chimed. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Relief, maybe, or acknowledgement. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, as she slid into the seat across from him. Neither was I, she replied. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, I don't really know what I'm doing. You don't have to know, he said. We're just talking. And so they did. The conversation started with safe topics, books, lectures, favorite movies from years ago, but quickly turned more personal. She told him how she sometimes felt invisible at home, even when things were going smoothly, how motherhood had filled her with love, but left her longing for parts of herself she couldn't name. Daniel listened without trying to fix it, without offering advice, just listening. He shared pieces of his own story, his failed marriage, the ways he had once lost himself in his work, how easy it was to wake up one day and realize you'd drifted from your own center. I don't want to complicate your life, he said, his voice low, but I also can't pretend I don't feel something when I'm with you. Emily looked down at her hands. She could feel the weight of his words, gentle but undeniable. And she knew he wasn't asking for anything. Not really, just honesty. When she finally left the cafe, she walked to her car with slow, uncertain steps. Her mind raced with questions. Was she crossing a line? Had she already crossed it? That night, she moved through her routines on autopilot. Dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. Mark didn't notice anything different. He kissed her goodnight and turned off his bedside lamp, and Emily lay staring at the ceiling, her heart caught between comfort and confusion. Days passed. She didn't see Daniel outside of class. They didn't meet again at the cafe, and he didn't bring it up. But something had changed. When he lectured, his eyes lingered on hers a little longer. When he handed back papers, his fingers brushed hers in a way that made her skin hum. Emily couldn't tell anyone about what she was feeling. Her friends from the preschool circle wouldn't understand. And she couldn't talk to Mark, not about this, so she kept it inside, letting it build quietly. Then, one morning, while Lily was at a playdate and Mark was at work, she found herself driving with no clear destination. Her phone buzzed. Daniel again. There's a small reading event at the art museum this evening, poetry and short stories. No pressure, but I thought of you. She stared at the message. It wasn't an invitation with expectations. It was a gesture, a bridge. That night, she stood in front of her closet longer than usual. She chose a simple dress, nothing dramatic, but something that made her feel a little more alive. She told Mark she was meeting a friend from her class at the museum. That sounds nice, he said. You should do things like that more often. And that's what hurt the most. His kindness, his unwavering trust. He meant it. He truly believed she deserved time for herself. And yet here she was, heading into something she didn't fully understand, something she wasn't sure she could explain even to herself. The museum reading was intimate, candlelit, filled with strangers who murmured soft praise after each piece. Daniel found her in the crowd and handed her a folded program. Their fingers touched briefly. As the final poet stepped down from the microphone, the lights slowly brightened. Daniel leaned closer and said, "There's a sculpture garden outside. Quiet this time of night. Want to walk?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the night air was crisp. They walked slowly among the dimly lit sculptures, their words soft and infrequent. Finally, Daniel stopped near a stone fountain. "I think about you," he said simply. "I try not to, but I do." Emily's breath caught. There was no pretending now. "I think about you too," she whispered. For a moment, the silence between them was deafening. And then she turned to him, her expression torn between guilt and longing. "I'm married," she said. "I know. I have a daughter." "I know." He didn't say anything more, didn't move toward her or reach for her hand. He just stood there, quiet and still. "I'm not asking for anything," he said finally. "I just wanted you to know how I feel. Whatever you choose, it's yours to choose." Emily left the museum with tears she couldn't explain. Not from sorrow, not from joy, just the weight of truth. That weekend, she tried to focus on her family. They went to the park, baked cookies, watched a movie on the couch. Mark wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and Lily fell asleep against her side. It was a picture of happiness, a life many would envy. But inside her, a quiet voice persisted, a voice she hadn't heard in years, a voice that asked what it meant to be truly seen, to be fully known. Monday came. Emily entered the classroom and took her usual seat. Daniel greeted everyone the same as always, with that calm, thoughtful tone. He didn't look at her differently. He didn't act any different. But she could feel it, the quiet understanding between them. At the end of class, as students packed up and left, Emily lingered. Daniel pretended to shuffle papers, though it was clear he was waiting. "I can't promise anything," she said softly when the room had emptied. He looked up. "I'm not asking you to. I don't know what I want." "That's okay." She stepped closer to his desk, still not touching, still a careful distance between them. Her voice dropped. "But I want to know who I am, outside of all of this." Daniel nodded. "Then start there." Emily walked out of the room with her heart pounding, not from fear, but from the terrifying realization that a door had opened, and she wasn't sure she could close it again. Emily's mornings had become quieter, not because the house had changed, but because something inside her had. She moved through the days with a subtle tension, aware of how easily things could shift, how a single moment, a single feeling, could ripple through the stillness of an otherwise ordinary life. She still attended her literature class. She still made breakfast for Lily, walked her to preschool, texted Mark about groceries and dinner plans. From the outside, everything appeared the same, but inside, Emily was not. Daniel hadn't pushed. Since that conversation in the classroom, he had kept his distance, never cold, never indifferent, just respectful. And that respect, strangely, made the tension even harder, because there was nothing to blame. No crossed lines, only the truth of her own thoughts. One Wednesday afternoon, she found herself alone in the campus library. It was raining again, the kind of soft, persistent rain that made the world feel slower. She sat near the window with a book open in her lap, though she wasn't reading. Her phone buzzed. It was Mark. "Thinking of making your favorite tonight?" Lily helped pick out the pasta. Hope class went well. She stared at the message, and a deep wave of guilt rose in her chest. Not because she had done something, but because she had almost done something, because she had allowed herself to drift so close to the edge. Later that evening, as the scent of basil and garlic filled the kitchen, she watched Mark humming as he stirred the pot, Lily sitting on the counter kicking her legs. And she felt it, the weight of what she had almost thrown away. After Lily went to bed, Emily stepped outside onto the back porch. The rain had stopped, leaving behind the earthy scent of wet soil and a sky slowly clearing. Mark joined her a moment later, handing her a warm mug. "You've been quiet lately," he said gently. She hesitated. "I've had a lot on my mind." "Want to talk about it?" Emily looked at him. He wasn't a perfect man. He forgot anniversaries sometimes. He got distracted during long conversations. But he loved her. Deeply, simply, and without reservation. He had built a life with her, a family, and he trusted her, even when she hadn't earned it. "I've been feeling lost," she said. "Not with you, with myself. Like, I don't know who I am outside of being a mom or a wife." Mark didn't speak for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I get that. I really do." She looked at him, surprised. "You think I've never felt that way?" he continued. "It's easy to forget we're still people, that we're allowed to grow." She exhaled, some of the tension loosening from her shoulders. "I enrolled in that class to find something of mine again," she said. "And I did, but it got complicated." Mark looked at her carefully. "Did something happen?" She shook her head. Not really, but I thought about it. I thought about who I could have been with someone else. And that scared me, because I didn't want to hurt you or lose us." Mark set down his mug. "Emily, if you're unhappy, really unhappy, I want to know. But if this is about you finding yourself, that's not a threat to me. That's something I support." She blinked away the tears that had started forming. "You're a good man." "I know," he said, with a small smile. "And you're a good woman, even when you're confused, even when things get complicated." They stood in silence for a while, the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Emily reached for his hand. A few days later, she went to class for the final session of the semester. Daniel stood at the front of the room, reading a poem aloud to close the course. His voice was calm, his eyes scanning the room. But when they passed over her, there was something final in them. No expectation, no regret, just understanding. After class, she stayed behind one last time. "I wanted to thank you," she said. Daniel gave a small smile. "For what?" "For reminding me I still had a voice, even if I wasn't ready to use it the way I thought I might." He nodded. "You were never lost, just paused." They stood there, the hum of the hallway outside fading in and out. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. "I think I already have," she replied. She left the room feeling lighter, not because everything was perfect, but because she had made a choice, a real one, not from guilt or fear, but from clarity. Weeks passed, then months. Emily and Mark started talking more, not just about bills or plans, but about each other. She began carving out more space for herself, writing in the mornings, taking walks alone, reading again for the joy of it. And Mark supported her, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes perfectly. They didn't pretend things hadn't shifted, but instead of breaking them, the shift had opened something new, a chance to rebuild, not from crisis, but from understanding. One afternoon, as Lily ran through the backyard chasing bubbles, Emily watched from the porch, a book resting on her lap. She wasn't the same woman she had been a year ago. And that was okay. She didn't need someone else to make her feel alive. She just needed to remember who she was. And now she did.